are listening to an Atomic Broadcasting production, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation. And remember, do your part, such as like, comment, rate, and don't forget to tell a friend to tune in for an Atomic Time.
Hello, distinguished listeners. My name is Harold, and welcome to Atomic Broadcasting's Starfinder 2nd Edition Wrap.
Woo! Oh, we're doing that? Woo!
Yes, cheer, applause.
Yeah!
I am here with the cast of Atomic Broadcasting's Starfinder 2nd Edition playtest, and I am going to be your host, your moderator. We've got a list of questions and discussion topics pertaining to the system and the game that we played, and I think we're going to have a good time with it. So, without further ado, first we're going to start off with kind of just general questions. Overall, base feelings about the system. Did you have a positive or a negative reaction to what you played and the system as a whole? Yeah, Sam.
I really liked it. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the setting, and first edition didn't quite grasp me for the rules. I think a lot of us can probably say that. And this felt like it really completely meshed with the system. In fact, I think personally, genre-wise, setting-wise, I think the 3-action economy, the whole system itself, rules, I think it actually fits the Starfinder setting better for my mind than Pathfinder. So for me, this was like everything I could have wanted it to be. It was very exciting. I was very happy with it.
Great.
Yeah, I concur. I like it a lot.
Coming from somebody who doesn't like to get into rules and stuff, I really did enjoy how similar it was to Pathfinder, just because I'm already in that ecosystem, so it's really an easy way to hop over. So I enjoyed that meshiness of it.
Excellent. So, having played your characters now for 3 sessions each, how did you feel like your class performed their roles? Those of you who played the same class as one another, did you notice any striking differences in the way that your character played or the way that it came out?
So I'll go ahead and jump in here because Jack and I both played soldiers, but we tried going in a different direction.
I was the better one.
I agree. And that's actually where I'm going because I thought it was interesting. The soldier class seemed like it was really heavily focused on the automatic fire and area fire abilities and really a lot of crowd control. And that was one of the things I saw Jack was really leaning heavy into that. So I was like, I'm going to go ahead and try out what looks like they've got some support for melee abilities to see how that works. So I thought it was really interesting to see that contrast and comparison. Honestly, what I thought was the most interesting was that even though I didn't really lean into the automatic fire, it was still something that worked. You know, I could still unload my gun even though I didn't build for that. What I built for was melee. On the converse side, I felt like building for melee didn't really get me anywhere.
Sure.
Could you proc a suppressing fire with melee?
Yes, by using the specific ability, the Whirling Strike.
Oh, that's the only way?
Yeah, because I 2 actions and then I do an area fire with my melee weapon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that kind of nerfs them a little bit. But yeah, I enjoyed the soldier a lot. I felt a lot more useful than my time spent playing Pathfinder 1st Edition. Starfinder 1st Edition, not Pathfinder 1st Edition.
What did I say? It's very similar.
It is very similar. It's almost like it's made by the same company.
What?
I've definitely felt a lot more useful. I also thought the rules were a lot easier to understand, and it was also a lot easier to just simply make your character good. Whereas I played the Envoy, and it took a lot of work to make the character good. But I did bite myself a bit because I initially wanted him to be useless, and then I could not get him to be unuseless.
Well, that seems like a design flaw in your character more than anything else.
It definitely was.
Jenkins.
Yeah, just to add on to that, coming from Starfinder 1E, which we played forever ago, I also played the Witch Warper in that. And the Witch Warper in 2E, just vastly superior. It still has some issues, I think, but we can get into that later, but just such an improvement.
All right. So this kind of just flows from that question. Did each of you feel like your class that you chose was useful in combat situations? Like Jack was talking about, the Starfinder 1st Edition Envoy had a lot of trouble in combat. Did everybody feel like they had their roles in combat and that they fulfilled them well. Yeah, Sam.
Well, I'll jump in since you brought up the Envoy. Playing the Envoy in 2nd edition. So 1st edition Envoy, I concur with Jack. I didn't play it because I looked at it and said, this doesn't look fun. And 2nd edition Envoy, I looked at and I said, this might be the best class. I love this. And it really showed in gameplay. The whole being allowed to just have these support abilities, letting people move outside of their turn, giving all the bonuses and the lead from the front abilities, really helped this class feel like it was hitting exactly what it's supposed to in combat, fully flavor, in exactly the ways I wanted it to hit for my own personal enjoyment of gameplay, in a way that I don't think another class has quite hit for me before in a system.
All right.
Actually, one of the things I found was even though I chose the action hero archetype, which was all about basically auto fire, I used the bombardment a whole lot more because I found it had a lot of general use and practicality. But yeah.
Olivia?
So with playing Solarian with a melee Solarian specifically mostly, the world setting isn't really geared towards melee in general. It's very much pew-pew, which is great too. But I really did actually feel very effective in combat, which I was not sure if I would or not, especially from switching over from our 1E campaign we had forever ago. I did not feel effective. Yeah, Jenkins is making a face. He remembers. It was not good for
I
me.
remember too.
Yeah.
It was bad.
So I felt very effective in combat, and part of that is because Sam helped me set up my character, because I'm not good at setting up characters on my own. But
really,
combat was good.
You said I helped you. It didn't take much to really make the Solarian work in this edition. Like, I didn't really do too much in like guiding you or anything on character choices.
That is fairly true. I typically have a lot of trouble building characters just mechanically onto the sheet, because for me there's a lot of brain static that ends up happening. And the Starfinder 2nd edition playtest, it went smoother than a lot of other game systems do for me.
Nolan?
I think it helps that Dizzy's very much got to go fast, so you can you can close the distance.
Yes, that's true.
Petit?
So when it comes down to, as I said before, I'm just definitely going to be like the newbie guy who only looks at things non-statistically and non-rulesy. When it comes down to creating the character and playing the character, I had no idea what I was doing, so I would just throw in things that sounded cool. And I feel like both I was helpful in combat, but also I felt very useless in combat, considering I did die twice. I also did deal a lot of damage in a couple of different hits, but Witch Warpers, I was told at the very beginning, are not easy to figure out as a beginner. So just going into it, I did feel very confused, but also on most things. So combat-wise, I don't think I felt very helpful, but I also did do some big punches. So
I have a follow-up question with you, Petit, for this.
Yes.
With what you just said, you also, in Pathfinder, for your first time, went for a not very new player-friendly class with the Magus. How do you feel like your first experiences with these two more complicated classes differentiated or were similar?
So considering I have a lot of support in answering questions, and you guys don't mind answering the same questions over and over and over again, the transition felt pretty easy. Like with the Magus, there were a lot of questions that I had, but I feel like I've got it pretty solid now. With the Witch Warper, I still do have questions, but it does feel very casty. But again, with what Olivia said, with the Pew Pew, I only shot one pew, and that was kind of out of combat, so I'm not 100% sure of the efficiency. So, I don't know, it was kind of iffy with figuring out how the spells versus actual melee versus using my rifle that I had.
Other Michael?
Jenkins. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm actually curious that you said they're more casty, because I don't think, apart from like a few cantrips, at least until the very end at the big boss fight, I cast a single spell.
Oh, every single
like,
time.
At all in combat.
I don't think I think I did maybe 2 or 3 like physical attacks. Everything else was a spell.
Most of what I ended up doing was just like a cantrip in my ability. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's a very interesting that you both, as the same class, had such different experiences. I'll weigh in a little bit since I was also a player. I felt like I was very effective in combat. I felt like my spell choices and what the Mystic was able to do in combat as far as like damage dealing was sufficient and like crowd control was sufficient, but the Mystic's bond healing ability also let me have that utility without sacrificing combat effectiveness, which in first edition, which we'll probably get to later on in these questions, first edition Mystic, you kind of had to choose if you want to be good at fighting or good at healing. That was kind of, you had to choose, and I didn't feel like I was being forced into that this time around, which I felt I definitely appreciated. All right, moving on. Skill usefulness. What did you think of the new skills, computers and piloting? What skills were effective and which ones could we use more? Jenkins.
So I have a lot to say about skill use in games like this, because personally, it never feels good when you make a character and like half the things that interest you inside a campaign or whatever don't end up getting used at all. But for this, as far as like computers and stuff went, they always felt useful because there's always like a tech thing around due to the setting. So even if like you're fighting hordes and hordes of undead on whatever undead planet exists in the system, I'm sure Sam can correct me on that later. They're still most likely going to have tanks. They're going to have guns. They're going to have things with the tech trait that you can utilize that skill for. So that felt really nice to have. There are, of course, issues with other skills that aren't as useful, depending on the scenario, but that's just part of the game.
Jordy.
I think one aspect of the Pathfinder 2e game system, of course, Starfinder 2e uses the same system. One advantage that it has is in the skill feats, because then those can give players opportunities to use that skill in a situation where they might not normally be able to. So like Jenkins, your Witch Warper, had the combat hack feat, so you were able to use computers in combat, and you're able to say, look at my character sheet, this is a reason why I get to use computers here.
It literally says, I'm allowed to do this because it has the tech. It was great.
And I think that is something that Starfinder 2e is really bringing out over and beyond Pathfinder 2e, was those skill feats of giving you interesting and useful but flavorful ways to say, I'm going to use this skill in this situation.
Nolan.
I kind of have a follow-up question with this for our GM for the playtest, Jordy and Sam. What do you think of the skills as implementing them as part of like scenarios or settings? Adding them in is like, oh, there's a computer thing they can do here if they think of it, or oh, there's a car that they can try to steal, things like that.
That was literally what I was about to talk about, which is great. Do you want to concur with the skill feat things you already said? I've never had as much like fun or choices to make getting skill feats before. I really liked it. In regards to the GMing, I felt like it was actually really like computers and piloting specifically. Because I had the people piloting, it felt really good, kind of just using them on the fly. I didn't have a lot of predetermined piloting and computer checks, but I felt like everyone, and I think I personally would have liked to have implemented that better into the scenario. But I felt like I was very easy. It was very easy to give you guys opportunities to utilize the computers and the piloting, with like the various terminals and traps and such that we all had set up that were kind of on the fly. So from a GM's standpoint, I really liked them, and I really especially liked their additional recall knowledge ability, because there are spaceships now, there are satellites. Now you can use piloting to recall knowledge, or you can use computers to recall knowledge about tech things or about certain types of terminals. And I would really like to explore that more in the future, as I feel like we didn't, because I think we would have leaned into it more had Starship Combat been available in the playtest, which I was planning on doing, as I mentioned before, but they did not include it yet. So perhaps we'll do a follow-up with Starship Combat later, but no guarantees at this point. But like I said, I do really feel like those skills blend really well. And in that regard, while I'm thinking about it, there were actually two skills that were very important skills in Starfinder First Edition that they dropped out of Starfinder Second Edition: life science and physical science. They are now lore skills. So life science was used to basically anything living. You could make a check about it. It was basically recall knowledge. Physical was all of like the plant life and planetary things. And they've kind of just dropped those into skills while allowing recall knowledge to flourish a little more across different skills. and I really like that a lot.
Okay. Speaking in generals, because we might get into more specifics later on down the road, was there anything that you found that didn't seem to mesh well or work well?
So, and this actually has something to do with Jack's character, so he might be able to speak more on it. But one thing that I noticed is because of all of the different races and them having like different movement speeds versus fly speeds versus swim speeds versus this, some abilities that specifically say like you must take this action, you must stride, don't really work for things that primarily use flying as their movement speed, since fly is a different action. I'm not sure if that's going to be fixed after the playtest, but it seemed really clunky, and I know Jordy had to make a lot of just hand wavy motions towards us during that part.
Yeah, my only issue really with a lot of that stuff is I just felt like there wasn't as much clarity within the wording of a lot of the features that I've noticed. I think that was one of the big debate, at least we had in our group, which was on essentially area of effect weapons can only be shot in area fire. You can't do a primary attack with them. However, the soldier's ability with their, not their suppressing fire, it's their primary target. It allows them after both the cone attack or like auto fire and area fire to make a primary attack with it, which is just a regular ranged attack with it. But if you did an area fire, like with an area fire weapon, it cannot make single fire attacks. But the rules specify that it can make single fire attacks. And so there's kind of situations like that where I think some rules are overriding each other, but that needs more clarity so that the players don't get into an argument.
Dovetailing on that thought there too, because we both had differently built soldiers. So when you had, an area fire weapon and you make an area fire and then do your primary target attack on top of that, it makes enough sense to just be like, well, I'll just roll my ranged attack roll. But for my character, there was a massive difference between my DC for area fire, automatic fire, or my ranged attack roll, because I had a +1 to my dex and I had a +4 to my constitution. So it's like, well, this is a really big difference which attribute I'm adding, and it doesn't specify.
I didn't even think about that. That would be a big issue.
One question, I know that you were talking about clarity on wording of things. When we were going through, I had this question all 3 sessions because I couldn't figure it out in my head. And Jenkins, you might be able to, I don't know if you had this ability, but it had to do with your, was it a quantum field? Is that what it's called? The quantum field that I had, it says in wording, when you seek or recall knowledge, you can apply the result against 2 related creatures, hazards, unattended objects, and effects in your quantum field. To me, that sounded like you do a recall knowledge, and you take whatever you learned and apply that to the other person or thing that you're doing the recall knowledge on. Like if you detected a weakness or something, you could say, okay, that other person has a weakness in it, which sounds pretty cool, and I don't know if anybody else can do that. But in reality, what we determined it to be in the 3rd episode, after I actually got to use it, was you do a recall knowledge, and whatever degree of success you got, you could also apply that to the other target. So if you succeeded on one, you could say, okay, I succeeded on the second one. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. That sounds more correct, because the weakness thing wouldn't make much sense unless you were fighting like multiple different kinds of enemies, and that I feel like doesn't happen often. I could be wrong about that. People could be fighting undead and then trolls in the same session. Who knows?
And that's actually what Sam had mentioned a couple times with, well, go ahead and explain that.
The reason it got really confusing, because as soon as you read it out, I knew what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I was confused is because when the Thaumaturge in Pathfinder 2e was in playtest, it had what he was thinking the ability was, where if he learns a weakness, he applies it to creatures of the same type. So it was one of those like, oh, they must have just done that for the Witch Warper, and me assuming that with Petite being a little unclear led to a lot of confusion there. That is a thing that could probably be worded a little differently, just for a little more clarity for people who, using just the term result. Maybe like result of the roll or something like that would be a little more beneficial.
Or even degree of success. I mean,
right.
Yeah, and I also would like some clarity on related, because as a game master looking at that, I'm like, okay, like, so if I've got a bandit who made a trap, are they related? Or is it just two different kinds of traps? Or is it two different kind of bandits?
Or is it the
Trait.
Thank you, the trait.
Yeah.
Like
So-
if they both have the tech trait or the mindless trait or something, or if they're brothers and sisters. I mean, they may not actually be related, but they could be adopted.
Traps have families too.
Take away nothing else. Traps have families too. How did the 2e switch to Pathfinder compatibility affect our approach or comfort levels with approaching the playtest to Starfinder? Meaning, this is your question.
You want me to clarify?
Yes, please.
Okay, so with the second edition playtest being essentially a shift to, it's
Pathfinder
basically
second edition.
Pathfinder base and then building Starfinder up
I
from
see.
that. Then going into it, whether you have experience with 1E or not, being familiar mostly with Pathfinder, which most of us are, but that familiarity with Pathfinder, did it help with setting up your character, setting up your just playing in general with
Cool.
the playtest?
Yes, Jenkins.
I know coming from Pathfinder 2e to this, since it's around the same system, I came in with a lot of expectations that as a caster, I wasn't going to be as useful in combat because I'm used to Pathfinder 2e and there are heavy restrictions on casters, for the better or for the worse, depending. But because this system, and Sam said it multiple times, I don't know if he said it on mic at all, but because in this setting, you're more likely to fight a horde of enemies than you are to fight like one big boss. You still feel useful. You still feel like you're able to do stuff alongside your like ranged fighters or melee fighters. I know Jordy said melee wasn't too useful, but you don't feel like you're lacking as much as in Pathfinder 2e when you're fighting the big bad evil guy.
Sure. And I felt that way too, having played casters in both systems. I felt playing a caster in Starfinder First Edition very frustrating.
I love casters in Pathfinder. Just
You want to get that out there?
I have issues with them
On the
but
record.
I play mainly casters.
Ooh,
I
hot
mean,
take.
same. Yeah.
Including your fave, the occult.
Shut up, Jack.
It's all you play.
It's not my fault they have cool stuff.
Do not resist destiny.
For me, it definitely was a help because, like I already mentioned, I like trying out different systems. I like playing in different worlds and the mechanics that are built for those worlds. And already knowing, I mean, even with 1E, the lore was connected between Pathfinder and Starfinder. And so having the mechanics be connected, and then knowing that when we had originally played Starfinder, we'd been playing it, we started getting bogged down in rules with 1E way ago. And then we did a little one-shot play, just have fun in Pathfinder, and we said, oh no, this is really good. We like this a lot. So we hurried up that campaign to play Pathfinder. And so there was a slight consideration of, is this going to be similar? Of that sort of bogged down with the rules and whatnot. But as soon as I started making the character and still carrying over that Pathfinder 2e understanding of the economy of how everything works, the 3-action economy, which I love, it made it so much more comfortable. It helped me be more excited and ready to play.
Honestly, the 3-action economy is one of my favorite things in their system. I've tried to homebrew it into other systems, and it is so much work. But on that note, I'm fairly OCD when it comes to a lot of stuff. I like to not only just like make a character, but I want to fully understand all the things I can do and all of the things that other people can do. I try my best to restrain myself, but there are sometimes I realize people forget things, and then I want to be able to remember them. But having it be so close to Pathfinder, it made it a lot easier to, even though I'm still having to learn all the new skills and all the new abilities and stuff like that, it all follows a very clear-cut rule and like rule set, or rather like structure. And so when you understand the structure, it honestly makes it easy to pick up pretty much any class. You just got to do a bit of reading, but everything kind of flows with it, and I really like that. It's very modular.
What parts, if any, of the Starfinder playtest might the group use in Pathfinder play, or what Starfinder character concepts might you bring to Pathfinder?
Laser guns.
So I already mentioned I brought a soldier in as a fighter, so I didn't actually get to use the soldier mechanics. I honestly think I would bring an Envoy or a Solarian. I think they both add
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of good options
Oh,
for Pathfinder. I think they fit really well flavorfully.
This is hyper specific to our other show, The Written and the Lost. There are so many more time spells in Starfinder, and I'm sad because most of them do damage, so I probably can't use
Can we
them.
just make Jordy give you all of the access to all the
He
time
already
spells,
said I'm allowed.
and you're just not going to take any?
They kill people, Sam.
Spells kill. Time kills people, Michael.
Time is
It's a
But-
shame that Alward doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
it is a shame that it is now apparently canonical. Alward doesn't exist, like Schrodinger.
Yeah.
But no, there are so many other cool spells. Like there was, and it'd be hard to do in Pathfinder, but there was a spell that like anything technological, you just burst into plants. They're so cool.
I have a request. Can you ask the soldiers if there's anything that we liked or would change about weapons?
Soldiers, is there anything that you liked or would change about your weapon options or just weapons in general?
The biggest thing I found was any kind of ballistics-based weapon. I didn't see any way of boosting its ammo capacity, whereas energy weapons, you could get bigger energy cells. And so I found as an auto-fire, one of the reasons why I used area of effect a lot more was because a lot of the things I would run out of ammo before I could even benefit from like primary attack or something like that, especially when I looked at some of the advanced auto-fire weapons.
Having played with these characters, if you could change one thing about how you built them, either class or class focus or ancestry, if you could change one thing about them, what would it be?
The only thing I can think is that for Squishy being the operative and being a ghost operative, I think he might have been slightly more effective as a sniper, because Ghost is focused on being deceptive, where Sniper is focused on being stealthy. And there's a slight difference there. Reviewing them recently is like Sniper might have been useful, but one thing about the Sniper is that they focus on using sniper rifle weapons, and that's like the thing.
If we were doing more and we did a longer form thing, I would definitely have balanced Dizzy out a bit. I focused her very much on go fast, stab good, and
It was
while
effective.
it was very good in combat. However, it meant that when we were doing skill checks and whatnot, she wasn't as great because she had low intelligence and low wisdom and low charisma. So like, can't pilot, can't do computers. I can just stab things real good. So for the one shot that I knew I was doing a lot of combat, she was amazing. But if I were to do a longer form thing, I'd definitely rebalance her out to have a little more option in outside of combat roleplay.
For me, one thing is I would definitely approach the role play of my character a lot differently. I don't think he quite captured what I was aiming for. But I think one big thing that I noticed is I didn't use my reactions as much as I thought I was going to. I had my double reactions so I could take cover and like knock people over to take cover. So I could do double up with aid and such. So aid worked out really well. But I think what I would do is they had another feat for the Envoy where they can, if the target of their get 'em dies, they could use a reaction to apply it to another person. And I found that would have been a whole lot more useful. At first I thought it'll be okay because I have all these other reactions, and they just didn't come up in the ways that I thought. So envoys should definitely always consider that reaction for moving the get 'em, because that's just so beneficial. There were many moments where I used it and then the enemy died on my turn, and I was like, well, now I can't help the team with that. And I feel like that could almost be something, I don't know, I feel like that could almost be something more than just a feat, but it's a low level feat, so it's easy access.
Sure.
As to my character, yeah, there's actually definitely some things that I would change. As much as it pains me, I'd probably go with less arms.
No!
I think six
Your
arms
arms were
is
beautiful.
enough.
No.
8 arms, I found I kept running into redundancies, and a lot of my stuff was heavy. If we weren't on a low gravity planet, I would be completely over encumbered. There's also a few feats that I found were particularly niche, though as I can't remember the name of the species. Barathu. Because of their fly speed, I definitely needed to invest more in movement speed, because that was one of the issues I ran into the most, was just being too slow.
Sure.
Dovetailing on that, because I also played a soldier, I think I found the thing that I would have changed the most was, as I kind of alluded to earlier, not trying to go so heavy into the melee. So I think my character would have worked out a lot better if I'd leaned into automatic fire or area fire and then just picked up that one feat that let me use the stock of my weapon as a melee weapon and then just call it good.
You mentioning the melee reminded me. It didn't come up that much because it didn't work out. But yeah, I would also work my character a little differently, specifically to not try to even think about melee.
What aspect of your characters that when you were building them you thought was going to be the most cool, exciting part of your character, and did it prove to be as fun or exciting as you thought it was going to be in actual gameplay?
All of my envoy supports, especially the one, I forget what it's called, the one that lets my other teammates move. That was just, I saw that and I was immediately like, yes, this is good. This is going to be the basis of my character. And it turned out to be. It was super effective. It seemed to really help the team coordinate, especially when we start a combat. If I get to go first, everyone gets to reposition immediately. And that just turned out to be just what I wanted and more.
Even though I literally just criticized it, the fact that I did have so many arms and so many weapons and just being able to rotate on a dime to whatever weapon I needed was very satisfying. But I could not do that on any other planet that has normal gravity or more.
Playing as the Barathu operative, I did find it really fun because the operative was just very much, you do thing well. See that gun? You fire a gun real good. And I got a crit very often. If I didn't crit, I missed, and that was it. That's kind of how it went.
It was scary.
Yeah, it was very fun just to do, it was very cool to do that.
Skittermander go burr, and it worked.
I think the thing I was the most excited about was the whirling strike ability. It was like, I looked at it, it was like, oh, this is so cool. Can't wait to try it out. And it was really cool the one time there was a situation for it. So I don't know if that would be cooler in a campaign where I'd be playing the character longer. But yeah, it was very situational, but very effective when it came up.
Yeah, coming off that, the one thing being the exploit for the ghost type operative, because it's something that triggers only once in combat, and I didn't think about that when I was first building, because I missed the distinction between just being hidden and being undetected. Because once you shoot and they know you're there, you can't trigger your thing again, which I think in a long campaign would be cool, because then like you work in more situations. But otherwise, it's like first one-time ability, top of combat, if you're still hidden, and it's really good. Past that, it's like, okay, now you just kind of do stuff.
But dang, is it
But even
really good?
but dang, does it do good when it does work? Yeah.
Well, speaking of Skittermanders, for our Skittermanders, or any other multi-armed friends such as Tenfold Carnage, how did we, because I'm part of that, feel about the rules for multiple arms? Did it feel limiting or freeing? Or did you not have an opinion whatsoever?
I do love the fact that I could potentially go up to 20 arms. But
On what planet?
I could
In
have
space.
it be empty. They're just holding different cocktails. No, I actually really liked him. I thought the fact that it's just one action, just switch weapons, is honestly, especially in this kind of system where it's a 3-action economy, any type of thing that you can reduce how many actions you're spending to just set up yourself is very beneficial.
I concur. It let me use my med patches a lot easier, and that came in handy with some clutch healing towards the end of our playthrough.
I did think it was really cool being able to have multiple arms, have different things set up. The only issue I ran into was like going into a combat, being aware of like, would I already have all my weapons in all my hands? And you can assume that in some cases, like Tenfold Carnage, like, yeah, you're just holding all your big guns. Whereas for Squishy, I usually went in like I have my one arm with my one rifle, but then I wouldn't have my other set of arms equipped with the pistols that I'd have. So I'd be like, okay, now I have to switch and then draw and then fire, and that's it. So it depends on whether you're prepared and aware of you have arms or not. I do think they're really cool, and being able to like, yeah, just switch different big gun in one action is a really cool way to go.
It was definitely very useful. I actually used it more than back when we had done our 1E campaign. I had a Skittermander. I didn't really use multi-arm too much. It was more a flavor because it makes for better hugs. Keiki was great.
Yes.
But with Dizzy, I got to grapple while also stabbing, and that was very satisfying. And then that also allowed I was able to take the heritage of being a Scrabbler, so that gave me even more options for my movement as well. So it gave a lot of versatility.
So speaking from more of a game master's perspective, because Vesk only have the two arms, one thing I thought was interesting was that the multi-armed ruling is kind of fits in line with power that already existed, which I thought was a really impressive ability. An impressive feat. I thought it was a really impressive feat for them to say you can have multiple arms, and that does give you an edge, but it's not an unprecedented edge. Because in the remastered Pathfinder, the fighter can get a feat that basically makes them multi-armed, because they can swap both hands in one action.
Whereas also, I think it's in the remaster, they added just swap as an action, which lets you one action, or one hand, swap your weapon entirely. And this is just like the next step of that, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and I was curious about that in part of the playtest, if they would consider like multi-armed ability, where it's like when you swap to your multi-arms, you may also do a like interact action to draw a weapon in the same action, or not.
That could be a really cool higher level feat.
Ooh, I
Yeah.
like that.
This is for our Barathu and anybody who maybe had a jetpack. How did you feel like having more common fly speeds affected your experience or your gameplay? This might also be for our GMs for balance purposes. Did that affect how you built your encounters?
So I know I had a jetpack. I didn't use it a single time.
I didn't know you had a jetpack.
I know. Going back to a previous question, that is what I would have probably changed, but nothing else was good enough in my opinion, except for maybe the shield. One of us got use out of that. Yeah,
A lot.
but yeah, no. For me, it was nice to have, and I'm glad it existed, but it seemed almost pointless.
I did take advantage of flying a bit, certainly, because Squishy like to get into the tight spaces, and usually it's like, oh, your vent's now up over like a chasm, and it's like, well, I'm just going to fly over that to the catwalk because I'm fine, as long as I'm in gravity. So yeah, I definitely use that of like, oh, there's all the way over there across this big gap that leads to space. I'm like, I'll just fly, it's fine. So it did help a lot, and I liked being able to kind of move. That freedom of movement was really nice as a Barathu.
Yeah, as a GM, I really liked what you were just saying there, because it allowed me a little more freedom knowing who they are, of what situations I could put you in. Because you had that vent entry, either you stay in the vent, or you climb all the way back and join the fight. Or you have a fly speed, you open the vent like you did, and then you can just head out, and you don't have to worry about all that intricacies. One thing I'm a little unclear about with flying, and it's more of a design direction they're taking, is because Barathu can get it for free at first level, which is great. I think you can get it as a cybernetic enhancement at 4th level. You get a fly speed. But some ancestors, like the Sheeran, can get it at level 9, and they have feats that lead up to it. And it feels a little like they're trying to make it a little more negligible. Not as big a deal, but it feels like with an ancestor like the Sheeran, that putting that many feats into it doesn't feel as worth it as buying a 4th level thing. 9th level feels a little too far for that for me. Like 6th level I can be more okay with, but it feels like, and balance wise for combats, because range is such a easy option, I didn't feel any problem with flight being even able to be abused in any way. It was very well set up for the system, and I would personally love it to be a lot more available at lower levels, because it doesn't feel like it needs it. And they also introduced, like, they have specific rules for when you're in 0G, what can and can't be used to fly in 0G, and I think that's a wonderful limitation, because which brought up questions with the Barathu, can they or can they not fly in 0G, because they are gas sacks, so what does that mean? I forget where we fell on that. I think we kind of kept going back and forth. But appreciate things like wings can't be used, but jetpacks can be used. So the jetpack would have been a whole lot more useful in the space group than it was in the ground group, for example.
I do have a question about the level 9 flying feat for the race you mentioned, the ancestry you mentioned. Is it a better fly speed? Because I know like earlier levels it's like 30 feet, 20 feet, or is it still around that level?
So doing a little bit of back and forth comparison, the jetpack is inherently inferior to the Sheeran flight because it's slower and limited.
That's fair.
When you're looking at level 9 specifically, the Sheeran dramatically outclasses the jetpack. The ultralight wings, which are a little bit more comparable, are actually very, very similar.
Yeah, so it just feels a little weird choices, and like I feel like they were trying two different directions of flight, and that hopefully with the full release they'll have more of a concrete, like this is what we're doing with flight. It just feels right now like they have two design directions for flight, which is fine, and it's great to do for a playtest. It's just something that I noticed because I was gonna make a flying Sheeran, and I chose against it because of the wing option to cybernetic enhancement.
Well, speaking of cybernetics, what are people's opinions and experiences with cybernetics or biotech personal upgrades as a whole? Not just the fly speeds, but I know that Jenkins' character had cybernetic legs, so do you want to touch on that?
The options for cybernetics and everything was really good. Honestly, reading through them, I was like, oh, all of this is really cool and useful, but I couldn't really find a lot of it that like fit with my character except for the leg thing. It's weird because I want to say I want them to do more, because even though I just said there was a lot, I still feel like it was very limiting on the options in between like magic and biotech and cybernetic augmentations. They all felt too similar comparatively, in my opinion. And like there are some magic stuff I think that lets you cast spells, which I thought was weird, like all the different ways you can, but that's not part of the question.
I could mention, when I was listening through it, the whole debacle of whether or not you guys should barrel down the door and let the storm in. Doing so would completely make Jenkins Patra completely not be able to do anything
Well,
because of those cybernetics.
Sheeran,
Okay, so
I also
as
had
well.
those legs.
So the idea of something so simple as a storm making your character completely useless,
Now,
it's a weird trade-off, I guess.
although at that level of leg, that would be debatable because there's only a couple of things, like your leg still is going to work without them. A higher level thing replaces more of your leg, and I assume the storm would really shut down you completely.
And an interjection on that point, too. The effect of the storm was something that I had created. So Paizo might be like, whoa, that is an absurdly overpowered storm. What were you doing? But I was like, it's fine. I'm corralling the players for a level 1 or a one shot. I need them to go here by saying, I will break your legs if you don't.
Well, I thought that was cool because the cybernetics give you that bonus, and that's something that makes you think about, like, environment stuff often just really doesn't do anything in the long run, and that's something that's really interesting that I thought was well done because it made us actually think about the environment, which we don't often do in a lot of these games.
But also it does give you the tech trait.
Yes.
So things that affect the tech trait now affect that. So it does give that.
Battle hacked.
Yeah.
For me, as having played first edition, we never looked at cybernetic enhancements really in first edition at all. I can't fully say it didn't look interesting. It didn't look very well done. Now Jack did some of it, and I'll let him speak to that.
I looked at it quite a bit. I found a lot of them to be very, very niche. Granted, this was years ago, so I don't quite remember all the details. I just remember extensively looking for stuff to add to my character, and I think I only grabbed just one thing, and it was purely for roleplay.
Whereas in second edition here, it already, like Jenkins even said, there's a lot of good options. Dermal plating, I think most of us had that. Just resistance 2 to physical damage. That's just a really solid choice all together. Now you have that, and I never even felt close to hitting my limit of cybernetic upgrades. And we know for sure by the time the full game comes out, there's going to be like 2 or 3 times as many upgrades to get or enhancements. So I was very happy. The biotech seemed really interesting. I didn't play with any of it myself. And same with the cybernetics. I played with that a bit. I had the legs, I had the dermal plating. They were just wonderful little additions that were available and made changes that I thought were very effective.
So this next question is simply suppressed condition. One of you submitted this question because you wanted to talk about the effectiveness of the suppressed condition and its prevalence in the system. Does anybody have any thoughts or feelings about it? Those of you that had it in your abilities and whatnot.
So I'll go ahead and jump in on this one. As playing a soldier on one side and GMing for a soldier on the other side, I found that the suppressed condition didn't really matter. So the way I want to clarify what I mean by that is it was either the creature was too strong to be reliably suppressed, or they were so weak that suppressing them usually killed them.
I will add, I forgot to suppress many times.
That is true. There was much suppression forgot in this bit, so I didn't get to really experience it as a GM because it was just kind of forgotten or not activated much.
I know for my soldier, kind of jumping in there, I did not often qualify to suppress. I think I qualified to suppress 2 creatures who immediately died in the first scene, and then I did not qualify to suppress for the rest of the adventure.
Right, and I can think of several times where it would have been very helpful and useful throughout combats because it gives that -1 to hit, and that's very effective against like the snipers you guys fought and such. And that minus to speed, you guys did fight a couple of melee-only enemies. Now, granted, Dizzy was going to be up in there anyway, but for your casters who went down from these melee enemies, there's a chance if it was used well, it could have actually prevented some of that. Not to say it would have, but I didn't feel like we got to experience suppressed enough in our bits that we did, which is unfortunate because it's a big part of the characters.
My personal opinion, and it's a hot take, I know a lot of you disagree with me on it, is the suppressed condition is too weak to be applied only on a successful roll. Like, it's effective, but like up against the boss, I don't know his stats, but I'm thinking I probably only had like a 20% chance to actually suppress him, which then means it's just never going to happen.
I don't know what your chance... Well, you didn't have as many opportunities to apply suppress as, say, Jack did. And isn't there that feat that you could do, like, just a single action stare to suppress enemies?
Yeah, I could build my character to ignore the check.
Right.
But
I mean, I could see them doing something with, like, a failure having some smaller effect, but I'm actually, personally, from looking at it, not having experienced it a lot, I'm very happy with suppressed.
I will add that there are some archetypes for the soldier that do allow you to suppress on, like, when they succeed.
Yes, I was actually about to bring that up, is that the Bombard type, even if they succeed their save against you, as long as they don't crit succeed, they're still suppressed. And
so you'd like to see that more as a feature versus a choice?
Yeah, I think that could work as a feat, maybe a higher level feat, so it's not a low level feat, but something to just say, you know, hey, I want to focus on suppressing, not on damage. The Bombard doesn't feel like, if I'm looking at Bombard, I'm looking at it like I want to blow things up, not saying I want to have reliable suppression.
So either put it in a different flavor, or make it something more widely available.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
I can see that. I definitely feel like suppress as it is, as a condition with what penalties it applies, is really in a good sweet spot.
Great. So we're done with the group questions for the most part. We are moving on to first edition Starfinder versus second edition Starfinder differences and comparisons specifically. We already touched a lot on this, so some of these might go really fast. First off, action economy. How do you all feel about the 3-action second edition economy versus the old standard action, move action, full action system that we used to have?
So I want to clarify, I don't have anything against the standard move. I did kind of like it. I don't mind playing in that, but 3-action is a lot more freeing on a turn to feel like it gives you more options of what to do without feeling like, well, I spent my standard doing that and I just have my move left, which granted your move can be used for more than just moving, but it feels more limiting than what we get with second edition's action economy.
I do have issues with the move action. I very much, the main thing that I loved when we first switched to Pathfinder from 1st Starfinder, and the fact that we're carried it over from Pathfinder into 2 Starfinder, it gives you all of the options. You can keep attacking something. You can just keep hitting it, or you can keep shooting it. You get a penalty to doing it accurately, but you have that ability. Or you can choose to spend all of it on moving things. It just feels it lets your brain work more creatively on the problem solving without having to say, okay, here's what I want to do, but how do I fit it into these specific types of things?
I know when we were playing Starfinder 1E forever ago that I was constantly confused about what my character could do when my character could do what they can do, because of how, like, well, you can use this during your move action and this during your normal action, but you can't use this as a normal action. You have to use it as this action. And then, like, it was just instance like you did, and I was just like constantly playing things incorrectly, I got used to it eventually, but it took a lot more than just being like everything is an action unless it's stated otherwise.
I do really like the 3-action economy, largely because of its versatility. You can do a lot of stuff with it, kind of like what Olivia was getting at. However, I do recognize that it can also apply extra constraint to what you can do. Like, you can do more with a standard action than you can do with a single action. The equivalent is 2 standard actions in 2nd edition compared to a standard action in the 1st edition. Because there are some stuff you can do with a bonus action, which costs 1 action in this system. There are caveats where they allow it as a free action, but there are times that I do notice when I'm looking at it and I'm doing my kind of mental builds and mental stuff, that the action economy can feel constrained, like I'm having to compete a lot more on what I want to do and what I can do. However, I do like it a lot at the same time.
As the person who wrote this question, I can expand as well of both comparing it to 1E Starfinder, but also if you have thoughts of the 3-action economy in general compared to other systems, because I know you play a lot of D&D and you have modded D&D as well and just sort of played with making your own systems. So, and you sort of mentioned earlier the 3-action and how you've tried to play with it in other things.
It's a bit of a caveat, so I don't know how much time we have, but I did do a full overhaul of D&D 5e to see if I could convert it to a 3-action economy, and I found it took a lot of work and a lot of rebalancing, because what you can do with a standard action, bonus action, and just movement in D&D 5e with its system, it takes a lot to adjust it. For instance, one of the big things is attack, extra attack. That's all baked into one thing, whereas that's 2 separate actions, and then you have to deal with the multi-attack penalty and all the different movements and stuff like that. And so that's a lot of where I find where, say, like, I really like the Pathfinder 2E's Bard, but I find because of their maintaining their songs, and if they want to move or if they want to cast a spell, they have to think a lot about how they plan their steps, because they are constantly needing more actions than they currently have. Whereas in, say, D&D, where you have the standard action, that's where you cast your spell, and your bonus action, that's where you sustain your song, and then you can still move, and so you're not as quite constrained. But I do like both. They have pros and cons.
In Pathfinder, it is, I believe, a move action to sustain Bard stuff. So it would be a move action to sustain, then you only have your standard action. But with the 1 action to standard action, or 2 actions to standard action, it's definitely not 1-to-1, and I do agree with that. There are certain things that don't quite line up with the actions to the previous actions like they should. There are some things that are 1 action that could be 2, or 2 actions that could be 1. But yeah, it's definitely not 1-to-1.
I think the biggest thing that I see is that when you're looking at, like, it takes 1 action to swing your sword, it takes 1 action to stride your speed, things like that. You're looking at the lowest level core of the system, and I think the coolest part to me about how the system expands is as you level your character, instead of getting, extra attack, when you take the attack action you attack twice, what your character gets is improved action economy as you further and further specialize. So, like, you'll get abilities later on to be able to do things that would normally be a single action as a free action, and it frees up your action economy to say, if you're doing the things that your character is built to do, you're more efficient at it.
I will say that's one thing I did notice in Starfinder 2nd edition, is it had a lot of that baked in, especially as the soldier, where normally I'd be running into a lot of issues with my action economy. They had a lot of baked in ways that I could still, say, move and still get my full range of capabilities.
Next up is armor class changes from Starfinder 1st Edition to 2nd Edition. For those uninitiated, Starfinder 1st Edition had each character had 2 separate armor classes, EAC and KAC, which were energy armor class and kinetic armor class. How do people feel about moving to a single armor class system with 2nd edition?
The only thing I wanted to say is that even though I do miss a little bit of the flavor that it added between, like, well, he's hitting me with a ballistic round or they're hitting me with a laser, it just makes things so much more simple. It's just, you don't have to sit there and worry about it for your character build, and it's better.
I miss it. It's not like I'm hurting without it. I do miss it. I really liked it, and I thought it added a little interest in what weapons you're using in the fight. Because kinetic weapons, an enemy might have a lower kinetic AC than its EAC, but then some his EAC might be higher. And with the way multi-arm works in the system, that would allow the multi-arms to get a lot more use out of, well, I have my energy weapons here and my kinetics here. Now, I don't think this game needs it. It definitely doesn't need it, and it does overcomplicate it, and it's not going to be as friendly for new people. But it was something I really enjoyed in the flavor. I also enjoyed half-casting, but I don't know if we're going to get into that.
I do agree with, like, how I said, like, I liked it a lot, like, the flavor-wise, so
I agree, yeah.
I understand where Sam's coming from. He's like, I miss it, but at the same time, like...
Yeah, I just want to jump in real quick. I literally was going to start with I miss it, so that cracked me up.
Thank you, Jordy. I feel so seen.
The particular thing that I miss is kind of like the same direction Sam was going, of having to budget between, energy weapons are typically more accurate but deal less damage, and kinetic weapons hit harder but they're less likely to hit. And I really liked that dichotomy of, do I just need to guarantee a hit? I want a laser gun. Do I want to hit hard, but I'm sure I'm going to hit it? I'm going to use a machine gun. I liked that, the difference of class for weapons. But I don't know. I honestly don't feel like the complexity was worth what it offered. So I kind of appreciate going down to 1 AC.
I definitely am more minded like Michael of, I loved the flavor of the EAC and CAC. Just, yes. But mechanically, when you're looking at your different armor classes and getting one of those debuffed or the other, it started getting a little too complicated. But my main trouble when I played 1E, I played a mechanic and I played an operative, and both were very pew-pew characters. And you have just trying to manage resource, what weapons I had, that also limited how I could manage my finances, because did I want to specialize only in one kind? Well, then I might not be effective depending on what we were next fighting. Or do I do both, but then I don't have enough money to upgrade both? So it then meant that I had less good weapons for the level we were at. So I definitely think that smoothing it into one armor class works out for the better.
That also brings me up in my mind, weapons were very different in 1st edition because of how you upgraded them. You basically had to just keep buying new weapons, and instead of just getting runes or whatnot, and that that made it a lot harder to choose between the two ACs, and so you couldn't build one. Well, you had to build one, so then your other lacked, so you weren't able to keep that balance as strong as you could without just being weaker on both points.
My preference for, honestly, the single AC, even though I do like the flavor difference between the two, I do think it does add a bit unnecessary complexity to the system, and I think that's why they decided to go away from it. Also, I found it added more time during turns, because there'll be time it'll be like, oh, I rolled this to hit, and then be like, oh, well, which weapon are you using? Or their AC is this. Well, wait, which AC is that? And there's constantly having to clarify what weapon we're using, what damage type, what AC we were using, and so it just added more unnecessary time to the system for very little benefit.
But I'll miss saying cacker yak.
I do not miss that.
All right, Sam, you mentioned magic earlier. How did
Yeah.
you know that was our next question?
I'm a psychic.
Wow.
That's not magic.
That's not a class in Pathfinder 2nd edition.
It is in Pathfinder 2nd edition.
I meant
Yeah,
Starfinder.
I'm a
I meant Starfinder 2nd edition.
This is Alward Erasure.
I'm sorry, but Alward doesn't exist.
I knew
Jenkins,
it.
as our resident occult caster, would you like to speak?
I need a question first, Jack.
Well, so I want to jump off what Sam said earlier, specifically about he likes half-casters, because he and I disagree on this point very much. So Sam, you want to say something?
I agree. So magic, everyone probably disagrees with me. One thing I liked about Starfinder's flavor in it was the half casting. That it wasn't. It had a more. It wanted the players to have more reliance off of magic and on the tech that it offered. I don't think it succeeded in that. However, I liked the concept of less spells levels overall. Whether that really, it didn't fully change the high level's effectiveness necessarily. But I liked the concept of the half casting and what they were going for with making it to where there's just less bloat in the spell slots, and lowering just the overall reliance on it in a setting that added technology. I liked the idea of wanting your Technomancer to make sure that he is consistently up with his weapons. However, I don't think they fully executed that very well, and I would have liked to see them try something like that with 2nd edition, but I also completely understand everyone else's in this room's take on wanting the full casting.
Jenkins, you look like you want to interject.
Yeah. So, as far as wanting the full, I like having full casters, but having half casters would be like, I understand where you're coming from. If you're gonna have a world filled with technology and magic and stuff, it makes sense to not be as reliant on one thing when everybody can have the other.
It just needs to be more of a different setting.
Yeah.
Or system.
They need to handle it different.
Yeah, I understand.
I feel like the Technomancer kind of breaks that concept. In a world of technology, Technomancers I could see going to the full knight.
Yeah, as somebody who plays casters almost exclusively in these games, I want to play a Space Wizard, and the thing that I want to do when I'm playing a Space Wizard is cast spells.
Yeah,
and
that's totally valid.
So in Starfinder 1st edition, I played a Mystic. I felt so limited by having fewer spell slots, but not only that, I felt very shoehorned into 2 specific, I don't remember what they're called now, 2 specific spells that I felt like I had to take every time I was able to get new spells.
Mystic
Cure, and it was like Mind Spike or something. Those were the only ones that scaled for free, that I could cast lower levels for free without learning that same spell at a lower level. And then I just had fewer slots to do it in. And additionally, cantrips. Cantrips in Starfinder 1st edition did not scale with your level. They always did whatever damage that they did at 1st level, they would do at 20th level. And I had a hard time with that because, like I said, I'm playing a Space Wizard. I want to kill things with my space magic.
Yeah.
And in Starfinder 1st edition, you just couldn't do that all the time. They're like, no, you have to use a weapon. And I'm like, I don't want to use a weapon. So that's where I'm at with it personally.
It's just totally fair.
Yeah, it's just a class fantasy thing, which is really important to me.
My big thing, message to Paizo. Okay, you gave us the Mystic, you gave us the Witch Warper. Love them. Can we have a half-caster Technomancer?
Sure. There's room for both.
Like the Summoner and the Magus.
Yeah, I want full caster classes and half-caster classes so that you can say, hey, let's do a low magic campaign, no full casters.
I think that's what I was trying to get at earlier. Is like, I want both.
You talked about your frustrations in 1E with the magic.
Yes.
How do you feel about the magic in the 2E playtest?
Oh, it's great. Cantrips scale with your level. Mystics and Witch Warpers are full casters. I could not be happier.
That's all he needs.
Could not be happier.
We didn't have to make a custom archetype for it.
No. Sam was very gracious in our Starfinder 1st edition campaign. He made a custom archetype for my character so that my cantrips would scale like weapons. So it was very nice. But 2nd edition remedied all of my complaints in that area. Could not be happier. All right, these next questions are mostly for Sam and Jordy, our GMs. If anyone wants to chime in, feel free. We're going to speed round the DM questions, and then I've got a last round of fun questions. Sam and Jordy, how do you feel about the scenarios and use of different gravities and atmospheres?
I enjoyed those. I wish we played with them a little more. I feel like I didn't give a good setup for 0G combat. I felt like I could have done a lot more with it. But one of my weaknesses as a GM is setting up combats.
I felt similarly. Like there were a few things in my scenario that the low gravity affected. Like originally I was going to give everybody like free jump packs so they could get out of the drop ship without dying. And I was like, low gravity solves all my problems. But like by the time we got to the final chapter of the scenario, I had just forgotten about the gravity. I mean, we're inside, so it doesn't make a big difference, but it kind of just petered off in how much it affected things. It was a cool idea, and I think the mechanics were just fine, but I think part of it was just the time crunch we were in. You know, we just didn't really have a lot of time to actually build in scenarios to specifically take advantage of it.
Sam, you mentioned Zero G. Do you think the rules around motion in Zero G need more detail, or was it more of how you implemented them that you felt like you could have done better?
I felt like they were fine. Did my players in space feel like they were good? I'm seeing nods. Yeah.
Broth is just confusing on motion in space, but they're not cosmic, so they don't fly for
I
free.
hated being in space.
A little more clarity. Even like they gave a lot of clarity for what works and doesn't work for fly speed, but the Barathu instantly brought up questions, and they were one of the core things they put in, and that's kind of weird. But overall, I really liked how it's set up, and I'd love to play in it more.
What do you think of the limited telepathy feature of many of the ancestries? Do you feel like it's too powerful? Is it just right?
Nah, it's fine.
It's good.
Do you feel that the existing classes tend towards ranged fights? If so, is that more difficult to plan encounters for?
I actually think it makes it easier to plan encounters for it. I do think a lot of them lean towards... obviously the Solarian does not. And the Soldier, we're not currently given options for the Soldier like we will probably get later. I feel like definitely leans more to range, including spellcasters. But I honestly think that makes it easier for group combats, because not everyone is going to be getting tied down or surrounded. And then it just becomes a slog of no one moving. Instead, all the enemies having range, all the players having range allows for a lot of freedom.
I agree. I also think that all of the classes being skewed in favor of ranged helps to push the game fantasy in the direction of, this is space, we've got guns. If you're not using a gun, you better have a good reason why.
Speaking of which, the range versus melee balance trade-off, how do you guys feel about that?
Like the damage dice
Like the
being
damage
different?
dice being different?
Right, yeah. For those who don't know, a lot of the melee got lowered in its damage for Starfinder compared to Pathfinder. And obviously range went up because there's more ranged options. I thought it was great. I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't even notice it.
My big thing isn't so much difficulty or frustration about the damage. I think I like the damage being the same with the emphasis shifting towards ranged combat. But what I would like to see more of is things that melee fighters can do, or advantages that melee fighters get that ranged don't. So in first edition Starfinder, melee did more damage, but you were more vulnerable. And it's still somewhat true to that extent in Starfighter 2e, not as much. But what I'd like to see more of is getting into melee opens new tactical options that I wouldn't get if I stood in the back shooting.
Do you think that the balance of the system favors more even-numbered fights versus a one big boss versus the party?
I've always felt that with the second edition. I think the system as a whole is not well tuned for 1v all fights. And Starfinder as a genre, like we mentioned before, lends itself a lot easier to group fights. And I think that makes casters more efficient, more consistently efficient. So because saves aren't quite as high amongst lower leveled enemies. And I think it just makes it a lot more fun for everyone.
Hard agree with that, yeah. I would say that the mechanics being pretty much the same between Pathfinder 2e and Starfinder 2e, the expectations of what your character should be able to do seem to pan out better with the setting in Starfinder than they do in the setting of high fantasy.
As character creation options get more alien, do you feel you have more questions about how to define them, or is it liberating to kind of hand-wave that and let weird things be weird, Barathu exist?
More aliens. Give me more. Starfinder First Edition had like 200 playable aliens.
I want to be a psychic cuttlefish.
You almost were, but you weren't this time. I want more. Just more craziness. I felt like even in Starfinder First Edition, they have more clearly defined all the aliens than Pathfinder has. Their races, because like Pathfinder has like the Kortaru, those weird like plant living relic things.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot wrap my head around what those are even supposed to be. But Starfinder, instantly I get all of them.
Sam, do you support my petition to add the extra arms feet for all races?
Yeah, sure. Biohacks, biometric enhancements, extra arms. Boom. There you go.
Now we're moving on to our closing/fun questions. We're done with the real heavy mechanical talk. This one's still for the GMs. GMs, do you think our characters managed to survive and escape Polanus?
Most of you. Maybe some of you. Actually, I forgot how I ended it. We'll see. Maybe we'll see you later.
I remember how you ended it.
I mean, as far as the ground crew goes,
They're probably okay.
if you've left the planet and you didn't die, do you really have to go somewhere else that's safe to count escaping the planet?
Fair. I need Vorp to live, though. He has plans.
He's on the
I was
ground.
about to say, I had questions for Jordy because I stole so much information and that didn't get touched at all.
I love how much information you stole in a text to me, texting me the result.
Yeah.
Wasn't even in the recording.
Not even in the recording. You didn't bring it up at
Oh,
all.
yeah. No, this is where the audience finds out that you stole an entire hard drive of data.
If your character didn't get brought into this particular fight in this particular adventure, where would they be in the galaxy? What would they be doing?
In prison.
I believe that.
Serving the Vescarian with honors.
Same here.
Squish would just be on another mission, some covert ops somewhere, bringing down governments. Who knows?
Would Schrodinger even exist?
That's a great question.
We wouldn't know.
I can't answer that question because I'd be on the planet regardless.
I think Schrodinger would sometimes exist and then sometimes not.
Really depends.
It depends on if you're looking at him or not.
It really does.
Quantum vacation.
Also, just for clarity, due to voices, Tenfold Carnage would probably be in prison. Or murdering everyone and trying to unleash a devastating nuclear weapons.
He might do that anyway.
I'm being pointed at, so I guess I have to answer too.
What would Dizzy be doing if she wasn't...
First, and always, Dizzy is making friends and going fast. Sometimes stabbing. And also, Dizzy's lifelong dream, maybe not lifelong, but as long as she's known she's had the option, is to serve under the command of Vorp.
Oh no.
Why weren't we in the same group?
That's exactly why.
No.
Oh yeah, Squishy would definitely want to be merged with Tenfold Carnage. He's like, that's old Karn. Let's go.
More arms.
12 arms. Almost there.
Take me home.
Which brings me to what Vorp would be doing if he wasn't brought into this fight. He'd be doing the same thing that he does every single day. Try to take over the Vescarium!
I love it.
Well, we wanted to test the many new things in Starfinder 2nd Edition. Does anyone have any character ideas from Pathfinder 2nd Edition that they'd want to bring to space?
I think I do. A really quick one. I actually brought a Starfinder character concept to Pathfinder before.
But it's the reverse.
Right, but I'm doing but for the reverse, I think I would do an Inquisitor of Sarenrae, or in the Brought to the Future, because I don't know if Sarenrae exists in Starfinder. I can't quite remember, but if not Sarenrae, one of the gods that don't exist, like Shelyn, or because Shelyn's now a little different, could be really interesting, or a Rovagug cultist even.
Space Wizard for me. Always Space Wizard.
Always love a good monk, so someone just being very physically capable in space would be cool. But then aside from that, I think maybe like a tech summoner, where like your summons are drones of sorts, would also be very fascinating.
Oh, that's cool. It's like a mechanic with more steps.
Yeah.
But it would work better.
I don't know what elements I would want, but definitely a kineticist. I feel like a kineticist in space would be fun because like...
Dark matter.
Oh, yeah, like different elements. Oh, that'd be...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would bring Zephyr to space. That's all.
So he would do well on Absalom.
He would do very
Or
well.
Akaton. Oh man, Akaton, Zephyr adventure. Let's do it.
I think I would want to bring Aiden just because I want to be a space werewolf monk.
Oh man, yeah, werewolves in space.
Your werewolf monk?
Oh, my werewolf monk.
Which moon would he transform by?
All of them. It depends on where he's at.
That's terrifying. Wait, you land on a planet? What's the lunar cycle right now?
We're currently in 32 days
Just-
of full
He's
Oh.
fly past multiple planets. And he's just transforming it, moving back over and over again. He can't
Wait, what
control
if
it.
he's on the moon?
Ooh, that's
Yeah.
actually a really good
Werewolf
question.
on the moon, what would it be?
Werewolves on the moon carry our harpoon. That's Futurama.
If your playtest characters can reach level 20, what would you be interested in them achieving?
20 arms.
I'd love to be a general.
to actually exist.
Tall order.
I'd like to hit something.
Really tall order.
I will add, I would very much love for Tenfold Carnage to be either responsible or inadvertently responsible for unleashing the swarm back upon the galaxy.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh.
That's a fair.
A
That's a
resurgence.
small order.
I already answered that for Vorp.
That's true.
Taking over the Vescarium is his life's goal. It's the only thing he exists for. Which answers this next question, which was, will Vorp reign supreme? Yes.
Yes, of course.
And this brings us to our last question, ladies and gentlemen. This might be the most important question that I ask you all evening. Is it responsible to give Skittermanders coffee?
No. No.
Now,
No.
now
No.
I am
No.
the affirmative on
No.
this.
No.
They get so much more done.
I'm liking that answer.
No.
So has anybody seen the movie Over the Hedge?
Yes.
Yes.
I know where you're going with this.
That bit at the end where the squirrel drinks all the caffeine.
Time
Best
slows
bit.
down. Well, I think that about wraps things up. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to try out Starfinder 2nd Edition for yourself, you can check out the free 250-page PDF at paizo.com. And if you have any thoughts and or feedback about what you heard from us tonight, please feel free to head over to our Discord or just drop us a comment or two. We always love to hear from everybody. Until next time, have a good night, and as always, have an atomic time.
This has been an Atomic Broadcasting production. If you want to hear more from us, check out our other shows on our Variety channel, or The Written and the Lost, our Pathfinder 2e podcast. You can also join in on the discussion by joining our Discord channel. Links can be found in the episode description. Starfinder, The Pact Worlds, and playtest content is copyright of Paizo. More information can be found at paizo.com. The music used is from Monument Studios collection, as well as other assorted artists. Information regarding the Starfinder 2e playtest, including a core rulebook and multiple surveys, can be found using the links in the description. This adventure is an original story by Sam Sarver. Your game masters are played by Sam and Jordy. Dizzy, played by Olivia. Squishy, played by Nolan. Flunko Pip, played by Michael Petit. Drakarian Kexar, played by Jordy. Commander Vorp, played by Harold. Master Sergeant Zigtan Vortan Zivti, played by Sam. Schrodinger, played by Michael Jenkins. Tenfold Carnage, played by Jack. Thanks again for tuning into Atomic Broadcasting's Starfinder 2e playtest. And as always, have an atomic time.
So, the next question is, how did the 2nd edition switch to Pathfinder Capella? Now I'm all off.
I like that take.
We're going to do that take. It's a good blooper for you.